folks. So let's jump in. We've got a good full agenda today. Some excellent speakers. Many thanks to everybody for joining this webinar on the faith participation in the People's Climate Movement mobilization in DC on the 29th of April. And what we're going to do is jump right in because we've got a couple of our presenters who need to leave before the bottom of the hour, and I want to make sure that we get right to them. Basically, what we're going to do today is hear from Kristen Barker from One Earth Sangha, from Liz Mitlak from the Religious Action Center for Reform Judaism, Joel Novi from DC, Northern Virginia, Maryland, Interfaith Power and Light, from Pat Almonroad, who, Pat, I don't know what we want to have your sort of official institutional affiliation be, but Pat has long been involved with this.
New York City.
There you go. And later in the call, Paul Getzos, the national coordinator for the People's Climate Movement, will be joining us also. He'll be able to join us at about 6:15. So here we are. Kristen, I know you're on a tight time frame, so why don't we go right to you, and why don't you, Kristen Barker is the co-founder of One Earth Sangha, which is a wonderful Buddhist environmental network collective that has a really super set of educational programs and others that it runs. Kristen, why don't you give everybody an overview of Buddhist organizing work around the mobilization?
That's good. How's my audio? It's okay? Okay, great. All right, so where we are, several things to report on. So our community has started to meet. We have every other Thursday, we're gathering together and doing organizing. We've got a communications team that's underway, and we're identifying sort of the rest of the pieces, and there are several. So backing up from the march itself, we're really hoping that the morning of the march that the faith communities are going to gather in some place, and that we'll be able to find within that the Buddhist contingency. And we're hoping to actually then, based on that location, find a park nearby that has a place for all of us to come and sit together for a half an hour as a pan-Buddhist community, do a half-hour sit. So that's the morning of the march. The evening or the afternoon before, and we're still kind of playing around with that, we want to also have a gathering where our community will be offering from each tradition, Shambhala, Insight, Zen, Thich Nhat Hanh, etc. Each one of the traditions, Soka Gakkai, offer practices for all of us to share in together. And that'll either, like I said, be the evening before or the afternoon before. Also happening the day before, and this is such a beautiful model that we're going to actually be sharing across our community, and hope that others can do the same. New York Insight is doing a great job of modeling what this can look like. Instead of having a schmooze and snooze bus ride to DC, they're going to do what they're calling a rolling retreat. So they have 3 buses and 3 teachers identified, a teacher per bus. So Bhikkhu Bodhi, Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, who is a really well-known monk in the Theravadan tradition, is going to be holding a moving retreat on the bus ride to DC from New York. So we're hoping to share out that template across our communities for everybody who can take a bus to DC. So that's the day before the march. And then we're also wanting to take this moment because of the climate, the Earth Day science event. We're also wanting to, a whole lot of background noise somewhere all of a sudden.
Liz, I think there may be some background noise. Oh, Liz went on mute. Good. So that should do us a little bit better.
Yep. So the last piece is we're hoping to make the month of April, and these are ideas very much in transition. So I might come back to you guys a week later and say, we decided that we couldn't make that happen. But our idea right now is to have the whole month of April be a sacred activism launching point to say this is what it means to walk this path in this time, and so giving sanghas of all traditions the tools to be able to speak within their communities and the energy and the inspiration to create sacred action. So we're going to host a webinar. We hope to host a webinar on Saturday, April 1st, to get that launched. So those are some of the things that we've got going, in addition to ultimately wanting to support the sister marches on April 29th. That's definitely a lower priority right now.
Great. Many thanks, Kristen. And what I would suggest to folks is, if you have any questions specifically for Kristen, send them in using the chat function fairly quickly, because Kristen will need to leave in another 5 to 10 minutes or so. So if you've got any questions for Kristen, send those in. And thanks, Kristen. And that's and now that we've got your video sort of front and center, that's quite a set of lights you've got behind you there, where those of us who are in the sort of more staid Christian traditions are having jealousy about these fantastic Buddhist lights you've got going on there. Why don't we go next? Karen, would you be game for giving us, Karen Brammer is the point person within the Unitarian Universalist community for the mobilization. And Karen, give us an update on what the UU community is doing, and we know it's always a lot.
Thanks, Fletcher. Well, hopefully we can keep up with that reputation, because there's so much to do. I am happy to say that the UUA, our Unitarian Universalist Association, has officially endorsed the People's Climate March, and so we should be, if we are not already, on the, I guess it's the partners page or the participant page, I'm not sure, but given that endorsement, we can now officially utilize all of the communication hubs in our Unitarian Universalist Association. And we have a communications team at the Unitarian Universalist Association that meets weekly. I'll meet with them next week and talk about our strategy for how we're going to roll this out. And that would also include the possibility of creating one or multiple sites where people can register, whether that's for buses or for local events, but internal to Unitarian Universalists, but also then to make sure it links up with whatever more localized organizing is happening, or interfaith organizing. I also wanted to say we've got each state and some regions have what we call action networks. They're primarily focused on advocacy. We're asking them to do a specific kind of organizing given their skill sets that will coincide with or work up towards the climate march. So honestly, there's another person on this, on the speakers panel here that I intended to invite, not into the panel itself, but I sent Doris the link for the panel instead of the other link. Doris, I'm wondering if you can pipe in for a minute and say what you know of. Doris is in Washington, D.C., and is as likely as anyone in D.C. to know what Unitarian Universalist plans there are for that weekend. Are you prepared, without me having asked you to do this ahead of time, to be able to speak to that?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Well, yes and no. We know we are going to organize. We do not have specific plans, at least that I am aware of, but there are many of us who are mentally prepared preparing, and we just need to get it together and start sharing. But very glad to hear about that communication hub and the UUA endorsement. So yeah, I mean, things will start falling into place pretty quickly from here on. And I'll have more to share at a later date. Thank you, Karen.
Sorry for putting you on the spot like that. Fletcher,
That's okay.
I think that's about it, that there are lots of things that will fall out of having had a formal endorsement now. And I can say more when those things get clear.
That's wonderful. Thanks. And one of the, what I'll mention one thing before going next to Joelle Novi, who can talk more about the local and DC region organizing work that she's heading up. It's wonderful to hear that the UUA has institutionally endorsed the mobilization. And I want folks to be aware that we have heard from a number of different religious leaders and contacts at various denominations that it's difficult for them to endorse the mobilization given the language that is explicitly focused on critique of the current presidential administration that's on the web page. And what I'd like to say to folks is we understand that that is an issue for some faith communities. It's obviously for the UUA there was a decision to move forward, and there was a very powerful statement last week or about 10 days ago that the African Methodist Episcopal Church released, in which they referred to a number of the new administration's actions as demonic. And so my sense is that they wouldn't be put off by the name on the website either. But we recognize that there is a that's a tricky territory for a lot of religious denominations. We won't be able to get that changed because the messaging on the website evolved through a sort of consensus among the labor and faith and environmental justice and racial justice and social justice partner organizations on the steering committee of the People's Climate Movement. Given that language will stay there, but it does, I think, make it really critical that we as people of faith find ways to use language that really is authentic and genuine for us to articulate why we're being involved in this, why we're taking this mobilization seriously, so that we share with our constituencies how it is that we see these issues and how we think about them. So I know that may not be the perfect answer for folks, but that's where things are at, and that's a little bit of background on that. Also, to answer one question quickly, we will be sharing the names and contact information of the various panelists and also point persons for different denominations in the coming day or so. And I'll let Pat Almonroad say a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes. But Joelle, why don't we turn to you? Joelle is the executive director of DC, Northern Virginia, Maryland Interfaith Power and Light, and has been heading up the organizing, mobilizing work for the DC region.
Sure. Yeah, we finally huddled today as a staff to figure out how we're going to support this work and are excited about it. I guess I'm trying to make a list of the main things we're going to do. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. So I think the first thing that Interfaith Power and Light is going to do is try and turn out the faith communities that we are networked with already, about 8,000 folks and about 300 congregations in the region. If you are a denomination or a faith-specific person on this call who is interested in helping us reach out to those folks, if your denomination or faith who are in our database in the region, we'd certainly welcome collaborations along those lines. That's the first thing we're going to help with. The second thing we're going to help with is connecting people visiting from out of town who want help with places to stay, either in congregations or in homes arranged through congregations. And we will be setting up some kind of spreadsheet and form this week to facilitate those folks finding each other, and we'll try to help as much as we can. We have both requests and offers coming in already, so I feel really excited about lots of wonderful interfaith hospitality occurring. A third sort of emergent that we're supporting as best we can is being a place that at least tracks, if not plans, other events like the one Kristen was describing, things that support faith participation in the march on Friday night or first thing on Saturday before we march together. We are maybe a little more involved if there's a Friday night Jewish Shabbat event in a synagogue, that may be something we actively help plan, but the other things are just sort of happening, and we're going to try to make sure they're all listed in one place. We'll be working together with Fletcher and with Green Faith on the faith page on the peoplesclimate.org, so that links to everything I'm describing and to all auxiliary events can go up there, and it can be a dynamic resource. Unless Muriel is on this call to give a Jewish Hub update, I can also do that. Do you know, Fletcher?
You should go for it, and it'll be a good segue, because we also have Liz Mitlak from the Religious Action Center for Reform Judaism, who's going to speak next after you about what they're going to be doing. So go for it. This is
So Muriel and I have been working together on some Jewish Hub organizing. We created a Facebook event specifically to capture Jewish interest in the march. We're calling it the People's Climate March and Shabbat, with the idea that Jewish communities can express their solidarity in one of two ways. They can send folks to march physically in this march, but they can also raise up climate justice in their communities over that whole Sabbath from Friday night to Saturday night. And there's a group of folks meeting by phone every other week to talk about this. There's a lot of folks doing recruitment, particularly in Philadelphia, Boston, and New York, as well as DC. And some of those folks are putting together some materials that can be used to stand in solidarity with the march from home through Shabbat observance. And I'm trying to think. There was and we set up that website has that Facebook event has a link to a form where we're capturing, giving Jewish organizations nationwide an opportunity to say they are partnered or supportive of the march, and clarifying that that's that's something they can express support for, regardless of whether they will be, whether marching is something they do on Shabbat or not. And just to respond to what maybe Fletcher said, some other folks said about concerns about negative framing and messaging. You can take a look. Maybe I'll put it in the chat, the Google chat, about with the Facebook event for the Jewish Hub. We just made a decision that in talking about it in that faith context, we were just going to frame it entirely positively in terms of speaking out for creation and delighting in God's creation as we do on Shabbat. And so even if national denominations and some faith groups can't formally get on board the official antagonistic framing of this event, I think we have a lot of discretion about how we talk about it in our faith-specific framing, and maybe that could be a helpful model. I have heard some talk from somebody, a Catholic on my staff, about interest in a mass the morning of the march, similar to the mass the morning of the first People's Climate March, but I haven't heard anything specific about that yet. I think those are all of my points. I mean, in general, a lot of the things we're talking about will eventually go up at peoplesclimate.org/faith. And my hope is that by this time next week, those things will be live. Fletcher, I don't know if that's real.
Yep, that's fair.
But
I think we'll. I mean, I think the aim, and Pat will talk about this. Pat will go to Liz Mitlak next, and then to you. But you know, I know that in 2014 we were able to get a lot of, you know, we did our best to keep the website as, you know, as up to date as possible in terms of times and locations for different gatherings related to the faith community in the march, different types of resources, educational resources, flyers, publicity resources, social media kits, that sort of thing. And we'll be aiming to, as you all will hear soon, Pat is chomping at the bit to get out of the gate to mix some metaphors and getting the faith page going on the PCM site. And thanks a million to Joelle for, I mean, the sort of, you know, the metaphor ought to change from herding cats to trying to do local multi-faith work around a PCM, big PCM mobilization. It's the sort of living definition of challenging. And Joelle, as always, has been doing an awesome job sort of pulling folks together. So many thanks. Liz, are you there? Why don't we shift to you, because we're eager to hear about what the Religious Action Center for Reform Judaism is doing.
Sure. So the Religious Action Center for Reform Judaism represents 900 congregations across the country with 1.5 million congregants. So this is really exciting for us to, you know, be part of this faith movement for this march. Unfortunately, the day after the march is our biggest conference, so staff time will be somewhat limited on the day of the march. However, Lizzie Stein, our legislative assistant who works on environmental issues, has been connected with Joelle and with Fletcher, and she is actively working on recruitment for the Shabbat Facebook event. So when people are calling the rec, we are funneling them towards that. For the march, we'll also be creating a resource page that'll go up on our website. It'll include all of our environment action alerts. It will include information about our partnership with Green Faith and about all of the Jewish organizing that'll be happening that weekend. It will also, all that information will also go out to all of our conference participants who may or may not be coming a day early for the march. You know, they may decide last minute to come early. So we are preparing to have resources for them. And we're also preparing resources for those who would like to be at the march but cannot physically be in DC.
That's great. Thanks, Liz. And thanks for I know you've been working hard behind the scenes to encourage the RAC to be as involved as it can be. And we really are grateful for that, and really glad to be working in partnership. So why don't we go now to the Master of the Faith page on the PCM website, Pat Almanroad, who was our sort of the person who made so much of the stuff actually happen back in New York in 2014, and who's geared up for a second go round, or a second rodeo, a second PCM rodeo, I guess. So Pat, are we gonna get to see you, or are we just gonna have the photograph here of you? We don't get to see you live?
Just the photograph. Actually, that photograph's about 10 years old now, so you'd prefer to look at that, I think. And Fletcher, just before I get started, really, I just want to say that I'm glad to see those stationary trees out the window behind you. At first, I thought you might be in a moving vehicle doing this, and I was very worried for your safety, so I'm glad that that's not the case. Fletcher, you build up all of this stuff about, you know, Pat's the master of the PCM webpage, and there is still not a PCM faith hub on the website, as all of you probably know. We have been, well, I should say Charlie Furman, who is the webmaster for the PCM, has been swamped with all that he has had to do, but he continues to tell us that it's coming, it's coming. We think that we will have a functioning faith hub on the PCM website within the next week and a half, something like that. Those of you who were using that in 2014 remember that, as Fletcher said, it was, I think, a pretty functional and useful tool for all of us. And we will try our hardest to make it be that again once we get it available to us. That's unfortunately about all I can say about that. But I did want to just mention a couple of things that are going on in New York. Or
Pat, I might jump in just for a moment, for a couple of more pieces on the web page. Is okay if I jump in right now just for a sec?
Sure. Yeah, do it.
So as we mentioned earlier, in 2014, we were able to get a pretty good array of materials up on the Faith Hub page, and we're going to do that again. And we want to be clear to folks that it's not just the Faith Hub that's page that's missing on the PCM site. It's the hubs generally are not up there yet, and the reality is that we are finally now with PCM in a position where the organization will begin to be able to staff up to meet the challenge. A number of us have been working hard to try to raise the resources to make this possible on a meaningful scale, and we've finally started to build some momentum in that regard. I think funders have begun to wake up out of the Trump-induced stupor and sort of sense of disorientation. So we're expecting that things will start to move faster on the web front, and hold tight because we'll have a good looking set of stuff for you soon. So, sorry, Pat, back to you.
No, great. Thank you, Fletcher. I think that's important information. So I just wanted briefly to talk about an interfaith gathering that we have planned for New York City and for the surroundings. This is going to take place on March 7th at 6:30 p.m. It's at St. Peter's Church, which happens to be my church, St. Peter's Lutheran, at Lexington and 54th. And excuse me. Those of you who have attended some of the larger just general rallies for the PCM know that those are usually about building enthusiasm and connecting people and all of that. We certainly wanted to do that, but we also wanted to make sure that this particular event highlighted the ways, highlighted our participation as people of faith as responding to the call of our various faiths. So it's not a service, but it does sort of incorporate a few things that you might see in a typical service. It's going to start with very short presentations, inspirational presentations by folks from probably 4 different faith traditions: Jewish, Christian, Muslim, and Buddhist. And we will probably include a secular humanist there too, to make the interfaith aspect of this as wide as possible. They'll each give a very short presentation on why their faith is bringing them to this. And then there will be, this is what I sort of am thinking of as the centerpiece for this event. There'll be a responsive sung a responsive song where the leaders will be singing short verses that are actually just taken again from various traditions, and there'll be sort of a generic refrain that the whole assembly can sing. That might be followed by a very short meditation, silent or with gentle music underneath it or something like that. And then we'll get to some nuts and bolts. We're going to have a presentation by, we think, probably Hody Neems, who's one of the organizers in the Jewish community in New York. They've been doing really tremendous stuff, and we'd like for people to see that, and we'd like for Hody then to tailor his presentation to show people how to use these tools to organize in their own community. And then, actually, Joel, I'm glad you're on the call because we've been trying to get in touch with you. Maybe I can get a commitment to you now, or from you now. We would like to have you or somebody from on the ground in DC join us by Skype to give us some of the, again, nuts and bolts kind of what to expect on the day of, what sort of particular faith events might be going on around the march, that sort of thing. Just the word from right there at ground zero, so to speak. There'll be time for questions and answers, of course, an inspirational closing, and we want very much for folks that are there to bring, if they have them, bring their materials to share, to bring signups for their buses if they have buses going already, and we'll have as much information as we can give out to try to make this a really useful and useful event so that people can go off and actually take some action steps. Joelle, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I could do that. I'm sorry that I didn't respond more promptly. It's on my calendar now.
Great. Thank you very much, Joelle. I appreciate it. So Fletcher's going to circulate all of our contact information. If you're interested in finding out more about this event, or if you're, if you'd like my help in any kind of interfaith organizing in New York City, please get in touch, and would be more than happy to, work with you. And I just see one question. Will the March 7th event be videotaped and then shared online? I think we can arrange that. So thanks for that question. It reminds me that I need to arrange that.
That's great. Thanks a million, Pat. That's absolutely fantastic. So in just a couple of minutes, we'll be joined by Paul Getzos, who's the national coordinator for the People's Climate Movement. So I'll introduce Paul when he arrives. Couple of other details for folks, and this is stuff that we will send out in the email with the recording, and also stuff that will be pieces that will be on the faith page on the PCM website. So there is now the sign up for different sister or solidarity marches to be registered online. My sense is, if I remember from looking at it a day or so ago, there are about 10 solidarity or sister marches already that are in different stages of planning in different places around the country. And so that's something I know that there are many folks on this call who are not within easy traveling distance, or even not easy traveling distance, of Washington, D.C. And so that'll be something to stay tuned on and stay aware of, because there may well be something near you. Another piece, just as we're going to be looping in different folks from different faith communities around the country who are doing organizing in their own communities around this. So if you are doing some local organizing around this and would like to share a little bit about that, send me an email, and you'll get the recording link, which will have my email on it. So just let me know so that we can work you in on a future webinar. One of the people that we'll have as a speaker, sort of in that light, is Pastor Leo Woodbury, who's based in South Carolina, and who's a long-standing environmental justice activist within the Black church community in South Carolina and across the southeastern U.S. And Pastor Leo's been doing a lot of initial work organizing faith groups, Black churches, to be involved in the PCM mobilization in one way or another, which is absolutely great. So we'll have other speakers such as that. I also wanted to mention, I got an email from Imam Safet Katovic, who wasn't able to be on the call today, but Imam Safet wanted, for the sake of the Muslim colleagues who are on the call today, that there will be communication going out about PCM through a number of the national Muslim networks, as a way of getting people connected to the Muslim organizing that Imam Safet and Sister Nana Furman are going to be heading up, along with Sister Sahar Al-Salani. So stay tuned. If you're Muslim, stay tuned for that. We are working on identifying a couple of people who can serve as the point for the Hindu community, and we're hoping to be able to have them share about some organizing taking place there in the next couple of weeks. So that should be good. I'm trying to think if there are any other logistical pieces that we wanted to mention, but I can't think of anything right now. Pat, anything else that we're missing that you and I talked about on the logistics front?
Well, actually, I was about to ask you if there are any more details on the day of. Do we have a start time? Do we have a route? Any of that kind of stuff?
So that's one of the things that I'd ask Paul Getzos to discuss
sure.
when he joins us. So I'm hoping that he ought to be here literally any minute. So that'll be something that Paul will share.
I guess one other thing to mention, we do have this. It probably won't stay in this shape and form once we get the hub going on the website. But right now we do have a Google group for faith organizing for the march. And Fletcher, I can send you or you should have, I guess, the link to that, and maybe you could send that out in the email that goes out after this, so that folks that would like to can get connected there. It's an attempt to try to have a platform where we can talk to one another and where we can easily get out messages to the faith community, as quickly as possible. So that exists already, and if you'd like to join that, when Fletcher's email goes out, you'll have the way to do that.
That's great, and I'm working on the technology now. Paul is.
Hey, I'm here, Fletcher.
Oh, awesome! Excellent.
I called into the wrong number. Sorry.
No worries. So welcome. Great to have you with us, and really pleased to welcome Paul Getzos, who's the national coordinator for the People's Climate Movement. Paul was absolutely critical to the 2014 march in New York, and is a very experienced organizer and activist on climate, economic justice, LGBTQ issues, a host of other issues, poverty issues, and we all owe Paul a debt of gratitude, because he, in many ways, has been the driving force that has understood the real importance of PCM and its multi-sector approach about viewing climate issues through a racial and economic justice lens. And so Paul got about 100 faith folks on the call. People are eager to hear what you can share about the march, the route, start time, and maybe say a few words also about, just to remind folks about the other sectors involved in PCM and some of the key pieces of the PCM platform.
Great. Thanks, Fletcher, and thanks everybody for joining today and for doing some great work. I just want to acknowledge Fletcher, who's been like one of the core steering committee and members of the MST to really move the work forward. And so he's been great and a big support and one of the leaders of PCM. I also want to recognize and thank any of the folks on the call who put together vigils in the first 100 hours. There were a lot of great actions and vigils around the country, and it really kind of set the tone for PCM doing work on the first 100 days. So anyone and everyone who kind of did those first 100-hour vigils, I just wanted to kind of acknowledge them and say thanks. And then I'll go into my presentation and see if anyone has any questions. So first of all, I think before I get into the route, I think it's, the PCM now, where our steering committee is upwards of 30 some odd organizations. We have the traditional big greens and enviros. We have a number of different EJ groups, including indigenous folks. We have labor, increasingly more labor unions besides just SEIU. CWA just joined, ATU just joined as well. So that's great. We're reaching out to others. We have some of the major community organizing networks, including Center for Popular Democracy, Center for Community Change, and People's Action. We have some movement and civil rights organizations, including the NAACP, Color of Change, Hip Hop Caucus. We have some strong artist representation, and we also have faith, including, one sec, folks, sorry about that. Yeah, so we have a lot of different groups, and it's really great. And we have youth and college students as well. So that's the steering committee, and that's really. And we're also doing some additional outreach. We've been in conversations with immigrant rights groups. We've been in conversations with organizers of the Women's March and some of the more recent marches that were happening, including March for Science. And so I think that leads us into kind of like the day of and the week of. So, you know, at the last week's steering committee meeting, the steering committee made the decision to not only focus on the April 29th, but also to really look at the week prior to it as an opportunity to bring people early into DC, make it more than a march, and really communicate kind of the movement building component. So we're starting it off under the rubrics of the March for, the People's Climate Movement Week for Climate Justice and Jobs, or Jobs and Justice, which will lead into the April 29th. Organizations are organizing different programs. NRDC and other groups are organizing a lobby day. There's going to be leadership retreats with young people with next gen, as well as Power Shift. There'll be groups of EJ members and organizations in town. And so if there's any desire, and then as well as like People's Action affiliates are going to be doing something. So if there's any interest or desire in the parts of faith communities to do something connected to the 29th, you know, that opportunity is there. And if anyone wants to help plan that, either a lobby day or a program around faith and environment, just let Fletcher know or myself know. We're looking for people to join that committee. And then in terms of the day of, you know, we're still negotiating with the Parks Police, but we are looking at generally starting sometime between 11 and noon as our official kickoff for the march, for the big march. We are also looking at rallies and feeder marches that lead into the big march. And so I know that Fletcher and others have communicated that there might be some interest in doing a prayer vigil or some kind of vigil before the march. So that would give you the opportunity, like the rally you guys had in 2014, to do that. So if there is interest on the parts of faith groups and interfaith groups to do that, you guys should figure out who should be points on that, and then we have to figure out location and march route and making sure that you guys enter the march at the right point. So that's one thing I would say. Generally, we're looking at starting somewhere near the Capitol. If you're doing a feeder march, you would start in a different place, or a rally, we would start in a different place, marching up Pennsylvania Avenue. When we get to Pennsylvania Avenue, marching around the White House. So we actually surround the White House and kind of have everybody in the different streets that are around the White House to really fill it up and kind of give it a good visual. And then the next piece of it will be to, then we're looking at either the ellipse, which is the area right in front of the White House between the White House and the Washington Monument. It's a very self-contained area. It would be really great if we can get it. There's a lot of restrictions on it, so we're going to try to get a permit for it. And then if we don't get the ellipse, or if we get the ellipse and we're too big and we spill over, we will then assembly on the grounds for the Washington Monument. And so, and then at the Washington Monument, so that's the route. And then the other thing that we're looking at is really we want to bring our visions and our ideas and our thoughts about how to impact climate change, how to move to a new clean energy, renewable energy economy, how to address all these different issues. And so I think what we're really looking at in terms of that is there's this arts piece, cultural organizing piece that we're looking at about local communities, local community organizations, institutions, and people putting together and creating what we're calling these tables that are actually parachute visionary tables where different groups come together and kind of plan and create their vision for the future, which will be an alternative to the current vision of the future and or what the Trump administration is doing, what the Congress is doing around cutting actually subsidies and cutting programs that address climate change, cutting programs that help poor people and low income people, and really kind of create these art projects that we will then display and present on the mall near the Washington Monument. And, you know, we're looking at potentially these big parachutes. Some people might remember them from the march in 2014 that community groups, coalitions, tables around the country would paint, really put their visions of how to address climate change, how to address inequity, how to address kind of racial and economic justice issues, and then deliver them to and really create these things and take up a lot of space on the mall with them, carry them through the streets of Washington, D.C., and then invite elected officials and others to kind of observe them if they want. There will be other kind of art and cultural pieces of that will also be included in the march. But that's what we're looking at in terms of those people who are busing. You know, again, I think being there sometime, you know, start time of about 11 to 12, finishing up around, you know, 4 or 5. We're looking at a collective activity. We're still trying to figure it out. But that's kind of the route, and that's kind of what we're thinking. So I don't know if there are any questions or comments, but or Fletcher, if there's anything else I need to touch base on. But that's the 4 things that we're looking at right now.
No, that's great. And Paul, what we've been saying to folks is, like in 2014, there won't be a central stage with people speaking from it, because what the PCM really wants to emphasize is that it's the people's movement, it's a people's march. So that would be the only piece that I'd add on that. And maybe, you know, Paul, do you want to say just a little bit about the PCM platform too, in terms of some of the key themes, because I think that's also really important for folks to understand.
Yeah, so, you know, last spring, the various partners came together around a platform that really rooted climate and climate action in economic and racial justice. And so, and, you know, we're a big tent, and so we're really focusing on solutions, including transition to clean and renewable energy future. You know, before we had President Trump, we were hoping that we could push, you know, Hillary Clinton to be bigger and bolder on climate. Now we are in a little bit of a defensive mode. But again, I think our core platform is about investing in new green and clean energy and renewable infrastructure, really doing things that keep global warming down below, you know, I'm sorry, I'm going to skip on the actual percentage, but doing that, human rights, access to clean air, clean water for our environmental justice partners, making sure that the new green economy and a just transition includes jobs for people, you know, real jobs, good paying jobs in the transition. And those are some of the things that that our platform calls are. Again, it is climate action that's rooted in racial and economic justice.
That's great. Thanks, Paul. That's really, really good stuff. And I think if folks have any questions, now's the time to send them in on the chat function, because we're going to be wrapping up in just a couple of minutes. Paul, I'm wondering what we've been saying to folks is we'll have more information in the next couple of weeks about any kind of information on buses and transport. And I've explained to folks that PCM is just in a position of being able to start to gear up. Maybe say a couple of things, Paul, if you would, about any plans for Monday, for the day of action on Monday, May 1st, so that folks get a sense of how the thinking is evolving around that.
Yeah, I think we're still trying to figure out what that plays out to look like. I will say right now it's probably looking at a day of intersectional action around immigrant rights. Yeah, really immigrant rights, civil rights. And so we're in conversations with immigrant organizations, African American and civil rights organizations, some labor organizations, to see if there's a way that we could work together to lift up all of our issues. That's still a little bit in progress. But again, if people, you know, again, I think there's opportunities if people want to come in and, you know, for example, come in on a Saturday and do lobbying on that Monday. You know, I remember there was a Quaker organization that was very interested. I don't know if they're on the call or if they're involved, but I remember there was a national Quaker organization that was very interested in figuring out how to do something like that. So that's an option.
Great, thanks, Paul. I'm going to pull up. We've got so what, and maybe Paul, a last question is, I had mentioned just a couple of minutes ago that the link had gone live for folks to be able to organize and register satellite events, solidarity events, sister events. Anything else that you can say about what the current thinking is about what PCM may be able to do to help encourage and support that? Because I know there are still sort of open questions about that, but anything you'd want to say in terms of, because we've got a bunch of folks on the call from different places around the country who won't be able to be in DC, but who want to be active locally.
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. First, before I forget, you know, you'll get the most up-to-date information about buses and other things if you are, you know, if you're signed on to the partner page, which is you know, on the web page. So make sure, you know, I know Fletcher's doing a great job of reaching out to people, but if you want to get the weekly newsletter and those updates, make sure that you're signed on to the PCM. You know, you're signed on as a partner, and you can do that at peoplesclimate.org on the sign up page. You can do that, and then you'll get weekly call. You'll get all the weekly information in the emails. And then in terms of what Fletcher said around buses, and then satellite events. If you're doing a satellite event, it would be really, really great to reach out to, you can reach out right now to, we're hiring a new field coordinator. So for now, reach out to Sandra at peoplesclimate.org and CC Jen at peoplesclimate.org. Because what we really want to do is make sure you're hooked up with folks doing the table. So I know like Denver, Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, Phoenix, Austin, Miami, Orlando. There's a bunch of places that are doing marches. So we really would hope that you're hooked up with, you know, we really want faith folks in the leadership as well at those tables. So that's the best way to go. Or you could, you know, email them or let Fletcher know and he could let us know.
That's great. And we can share those email addresses with folks in the follow-up email we send everybody who's registered for this webinar. So you'll get it that way too. That's great. Thanks a million, Paul. And thanks for taking the time to join us. I know you got a few things going on.
Is that it, Fletcher?
Yep, I think we're good. Yep, I think we're good.
All right. Well, I just wanted to once again thank everybody for your for helping out with our stuff.
Yep. No, it's great to be part of the PCM, and I know we're all excited about it. So I'm not seeing any further questions on the screen. We'll have our next call like this 2 weeks from 2 weeks from today at the same time, 5:30 to 6:30 Eastern, and that'll be on Monday, the 6th of March, and we'll have more updates from different faith leaders who are organizing within their denominations or religious traditions, and further updates. By then, we're confident we're going to have the faith page up on the PCM website. So we'll have a triumphant report from Pat Almonroad about that, and more updates from all over. So many thanks to Joelle and to Pat and to Karen and to Doris and Liz, and to Paul and to Kristen for speaking tonight. Thanks everybody for joining us. Oh, I'm seeing one final question as we reach out to people in other cities. How can we connect between faiths? The short answer to that is send an email to me. Again, you'll get my email address through the email with the recording link, and we'll help get those connections made. And we'll have more information in coming webinars on the transportation. I see there are some questions about the metro and sort of traveling around the city. We'll have a section of a future webinar where we'll talk in more detail about the transit, both buses to DC and then getting around within DC on the day of the march. So many thanks, everybody. Have a good evening, and we'll talk again soon. Take care, and God bless. Bye-bye now.